Well, it's been a while, but we're here with our dear friend Michele Bachmann, as you know, was a congressperson from Minnesota. She's dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University in Virginia Beach. That's excellent. Michele Bachmann, welcome. Now, this Tim Walz, he's trying to portray himself as some kind of middle America moderate. I mean, isn't this sick?
It's absolutely sick, Mark. Actually, Tim Walz and I entered Congress together the same year in 2006. Prior to that, he'd been a high school teacher for about 20 years, and then he went to Congress. And he was a radical from the very beginning in the Progressive Caucus. I was so shocked because he came across as this backslapping, aw shucks kind of a good old boy. But when he went on the floor of Congress, he screamed and shouted and ripped apart conservative policies and bandied about the progressive agenda. I was shocked. I didn't know that he was that progressive. But he proved that all through his 12 years in Congress. And then as governor, it was like the roof came off. Every fantasy of the left he put into place, and he had his entire agenda that he put in 2023, and he was so successful that Barack Obama, Biden, and Harris called Walz to the White House in order to show him off to all the Democrats across the country. This is what all you guys want to do. You want to put in this radical agenda just like Walz did. And Walz was able to put it in because he had a Democrat House, Democrat Senate. They went for broke, and it's the most radical agenda I've ever seen. I sent it to you, Mark. I wrote a summary of it. I have it available. And I'll tell you, no one could believe what he did. We're a solid state. He completely upended the state, and he's put us in the poorhouse, and he's destroyed people's lives. And he's caused so many people to leave this state. In fact, what he did was so bad in this 2023 election or session that 30,000 people in this state took $2 billion in assets out and moved and left. And we had, the year before that, 19,000 leave. That doesn't sound like a lot of people. It's a ton of people for Minnesota. And it's the people that own something who are leaving. What we're attracting to Minnesota are impoverished people. He can't wait to bring more illegal aliens into this state. And that's why, Mark, Walz gave free driver's license to 80,000 illegal aliens. Then they're put on the voter rolls in Minnesota. Then he gave them all free school breakfast, free school lunch, free housing, free SNAP food programs, and then he gave them free college. So if you come to Minnesota and you're an illegal alien, you get free college.
Gives them free health care, too, recently, I read. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. He gives them free
how the
health
hell can a state pay for people who just come into the state, who have no roots in the state, who come there for the welfare state, and all the taxpayers, the hardworking citizens of Minnesota? I mean, why do they vote for the guy? I don't understand this. Is it because they're so committed to the Democrat Party like a religion that they can't help themselves?
Well, Walz did this in his second term, so there is no other election for him. And he got the trifecta. He got the House, he got the Senate, and he decided he was going to go for broke, and that's exactly what he did. He was sitting on a surplus, Mark, of $17 billion. He blew the wad. He blew up the spending in 1 year. Listen to this, 40%. So the state budget now spends 40% more than it ever did, and it condemns the taxpayers of Minnesota to an increase in our taxes of $8 to $10 billion. So the wealthy people are leaving this state. All of the impoverished people are coming in, and he's giving away free school breakfast to every kid in Minnesota, free school lunch to every kid in Minnesota, and free college to anyone in Minnesota who's making less than $80,000 a year. That's easy to do for the period of time you're in college. And so the most expensive programs that there are, he's made them free to other people, but very expensive to the people who live here in Minnesota. But people probably know him from the George Floyd riots. And during the George Floyd riots, literally as governor, he told the National Guard to stand down. He watched the 3rd Precinct in Minnesota, the police precinct, burn to the ground. That lit the match to riots in cities all across the United States. Just so people know, this means 5 miles of businesses. 5 miles. Get in your car and drive 5 miles. 5 miles of businesses in Minnesota were burned to the ground. It was the 2nd largest insurance disaster in the history of America. And that happened because Walz refused to intervene. He refused to use the police. In fact, he went on TV and he said, these people, they have a reason to have grievances. I'm a white guy. I apologize. And then he called for defunding the police. That's him. But let me tell you what he did during COVID. During COVID, he was the worst governor in the country. He mandated all the masks and all of the closures and all the vaccines, even though school kids were committing suicide. He was told about that. He still kept it up. But during that time, we have a huge Islamic community in the state of Minnesota. He's made it very easy for the Islamic community to come into this state. And we've had such problems with fraud being committed by this community. They had over $100 million in fraud in phony daycare centers that they set up and they didn't. Then during COVID, the worst fraud in America happened under Tim Walz. The Somalis said that they were feeding kids. They said they were feeding more kids than even exist in Minnesota, and it was over $250 million. Walz didn't fire anybody. He didn't bring charges against anybody. He covered for them.
With us is former representative from Minnesota, Michele Bachmann, Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University in Virginia Beach, really laying out the facts, the real resume that this guy Tim Walz has, not the media cover-up. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. We had a hard break, Michelle. Go ahead and continue where you were.
Well, Walz is involved throughout his entire governorship of covering up some of the fraud in the Islamic communities in Minnesota, and it is the worst fraud in America under COVID. It was well over $250 million that was stolen by members of the Somali community. He had covered up for them on prior fraud. No one was ever fired. No one was ever indicted or taken to jail. No legal system. The most recent one is an autism program where, again, money is being stolen hand over fist out of that program. This is why it's important. When you look at Kamala Harris's choice, she had Josh Shapiro, and he had served in the Israeli Defense Forces. And so what we've seen really in this election cycle is unlike any other cycle. A coup occurred of one of our major political parties, the Democrat Party. And what we've seen is that both political parties were pro-Israel to different extents, but pro-Israel. This year, there is an influence from the Islamic community, and they have pushed aside the pro-Jewish sensibilities, and instead they have in Harris the bad cop when it came to Israel in the Biden administration. She would give Hamas talking points and demand of Netanyahu that he follows Hamas's talking points and tell him that, look, you got to lose this war against Hamas. And who does she choose for her running mate? Not Shapiro, who is in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. She chooses another pro-Islamic candidate. So from the top of the ticket, Harris, to the bottom with Walz, neither one of them is pro-Israel. They're pro-Islam. This is a radical change for the Democrat Party. It's never taken this stance. And people need to understand when it comes to Israel, we've now lost one of the major political parties. And once they get into office, they will not be pro-Israel. They've demonstrated that throughout their careers. So this is a huge foreign
You are 100%
issue.
correct, which is why Bernie Sanders, Tlaib, Omar, and the rest are so thrilled with this guy, the governor of Minnesota, because he's identical to Kamala Harris in her hate for the state of Israel. Now, before we lose time here, this guy Walz also has these very close connections with communist China. He's defending them. They're not our adversary. What's that all about?
Well, he's made, now think of this. This is a guy who was a public school teacher, not making a lot of money. And he had the ability to go to China not once, not 5 times. He's gone 30 times to communist China. And he and his wife went over there, I believe, around the time of their marriage. So this is a long-term relationship that he has. That's part of the Biden problem. He was bought and paid for by the communist Chinese. Well, shazam, here we have Tim Walz cut out of the exact same communist Chinese cloth. It isn't like he goes to Israel 30 times. He has gone to communist China 30 times. This is his foreign policy, pro-communist China and pro-Hamas and the Islamic agenda. We've never had a ticket that has been so obvious. And
by the way, for the media, Michelle Bachmann is 100% correct. 100% correct. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, the other thing that Tim Walz put through here in Minnesota, I want every business owner and every employee to listen to this. He put through a paid medical family leave act and sick policies forcing every business in Minnesota, whether it's religious, whether it's a big business, medium business, small business, or government, they all have to pay for their employees to be gone up to 5 months a year.
Wow.
You heard me right. And the employee gets to elect, and the employer can't ask any questions. So if the employee says, hey, someone in my family, and the employee gets to define family, it might be a friend, it might be an aunt, for whatever reason they want, they can say that they're not coming to work that day. And they can have over 5 months, that's over 21 weeks and 1 day off for sick medical family. And they can do that.
You know who this guy sounds like? Sounds like Maduro to me.
Oh, exactly.
I'm not kidding. Sounds like Maduro to me.
And so Minnesota will look like Venezuela in very short order.
I mean, just walking around, I remember Hugo Chavez walking down the streets when he took over early on. That building is ours. That building is. I see that building. Yeah, we now control that. It's the same thing effectively, where he's walking around saying, "Okay, now this business, you're going to do this, whether you afford it or not. You're going to do this." What is this? It's so sick. It even gets down to tampons in the boys' bathroom in public schools. Did I hear that right?
So, exactly. For 4th grade boys' bathrooms, there's going to be tampons in there. Because the other thing Walz did is he made Minnesota a transgender sanctuary state. Mm-hmm. Anyone can come to Minnesota and get mutilated in their body and chemically castrated. But also, he made it so that for Minnesota parents, any Minnesota parent who objects, the child will be removed from the parent. And if anyone comes to Minnesota to get this surgery, then that child becomes a ward of the state until all of that process is over. And so that if a parent changes their mind in the process, too bad. You've lost your kid. So what fascism means, for people who don't understand, it means private ownership but government control. That's the definition of fascism. That's what Tim Walz has put into Minnesota. So we can still own our home, we can still own our business, but it is controlled completely by the government. And it's changed. That's why we saw 19,000 people leave year before last, and last year 30,000 people left and took $2 billion in assets.
Michelle, this is why she chose him. She chose him because he's an out-of-your-mind crackpot extremist.
Because he's
so the idea that Pelosi vouches for him, I don't know what they're talking about. He's very moderate. Or that George Stephanopoulos says this is a man with Midwestern values. Don't you love it when San Francisco and New York tell us what the Midwest is all about? Don't you love that?
I can tell you, as somebody who's known him personally, I flew on planes with him, I talked to him all through my 8 years in Congress. This is an AOC loving radical. The Democrat Socialists of America, those are the people who backed AOC. That they're thrilled that he is the person. And that's what happened over the weekend. It was going to be Josh Shapiro, but it was really because he was a Jew. Because I will tell you, this year, it's the Jew haters who won. They want at the top of the ticket. They want at the bottom of the ticket. We've never seen this before, where a political party has been completely co-opted.
And Michelle Bachmann, they're telling us, oh, you can't say that because Harris is married to a Jew. Look, I'm a Jew. I don't care who she's married to. We're talking about her politics. We're talking about her ideology. We're talking about, I mean, the Prime Minister of UK, who's another Israel Jew hater, his wife's Jewish too. You don't get a pass because you happen to fall in love with somebody who's a Jew. You don't get a pass. Your policies, your politics, your governance. That's what we're analyzing. That's what we're looking at. And it's abhorrent.
Exactly. I went to Washington, D.C. to be in the House chamber when Prime Minister Netanyahu was there giving his speech. And there, as big as life, was the big absence of Kamala Harris. And why is that? Because the Islamic community had said to her, they love it when Israel's insulted. She insulted Israel by not being present. And where was she? At a sorority sister meeting. That's where she was, rather than being with the Prime Minister of Israel when Israel is in an existential crisis. So she is clearly shown.
I've got to finish, but let's put it this way. When it comes to condemning the river to the sea, Hitler Youth that were marching in the streets, that were burning the American flag, raising the Palestinian flag, beating, chasing Jewish students, graffiti on our monuments, graffiti on synagogues. I don't remember Kamala Harris getting up, relentlessly condemning it and demanding actions be taken. I don't remember this guy, Tim Walz, ever saying a damn thing about it. Am I wrong?
No, not once. Not once. And when the 12 Druze kids were killed in Israel, it took Harris over 24 hours to even say anything about 12 kids being killed by an Iranian bomb.
Has Tim Walz condemned the communist Chinese for enslaving in concentration camps 2.5 million Uyghurs?
No.
I mean, if he has, he's done it very rarely and very quietly.
He's pro-communist China.
All right, Michelle Bachmann, we're going to have you back more often. You're too good not to be heard from, And we appreciate you here very, very much, my friend.
Well, thank you. There's a reason why you're the great one. So thank you so much for having me on. But I want everyone to realize there is no moderate ever in Tim Walz. He's a radical's radical.
He's a kook. Yeah. All right. Thank you. God bless you. My best to your family.
Okay,
Michelle Bachmann has always been a patriot, and she's always had courage. They used to attack her. But that's what they do to patriots.